One of the greatest things that I love about Hunter is Lucky Pants. What I always default to on my Hunter when I'm not sure what I want to play and what I want to use is Lucky Pants. It's one of my saved default loadouts. And last night I was playing Coil and I decided instead of being on Solar, I wanted to try Stasis. So I switched over to Stasis and then I started realizing that, wait a minute, with the artifact, we can get Radiant on any subclass. We already have Lucky Pants, which is a subclass neutral exotic. And then we have the ability to become Radiant on that subclass. So we can stack the damage bonus from Radiant with the damage bonus from Lucky Pants, plus one other fragment within the build that's going to allow us to deal extra damage with Malfeasance, which is going to be what we're using in this build with Lucky Pants. And it's going to absolutely destroy champions and melt high health targets, mini bosses, and bosses. And in this season, we're going to have 3 out of the 6 Nightfalls where this loadout is going to be incredibly potent. We have Hypernet Current, which is going to have taken enemies, Unstoppable and Overload. Lake of Shadows, which is also going to have taken enemies that are going to be Unstoppable and Overload. And then we're going to have the Corrupted, which is also going to have Unstoppables and Overloads, and they're going to be taken. So we're going to have a lot of ways where we're going to be using this in endgame where it's going to be incredibly effective. Now, the benefit of using Stasis is that we have some intrinsic ways to stop unstoppable champions as well as stun and slow overload champions. We have our Duskfield Grenade, and then we have 2 copies of our Shuriken, which will freeze if both of those Shurikens hit an unstoppable or if they hit an overload champion. We throw a Duskfield on top of an overload, it's going to get instantly stunned because it's going to provide slow. And if we throw it on top of an unstoppable, it will also freeze. And then when we provide damage onto that unstoppable, they will become stunned. We also have the Taken Slugs on Malfeasance, which will stun the unstoppable champion on top of everything else that we're doing here. And here's the math on what I have. 25% damage bonus for weapons with Radiant, 60% with 10 stacking shots up to the 600% cap with Lucky Pants, a 50% damage bonus on a frozen target, 20% extra damage by using Vorpal on Malfeasance on either a boss or a champion, a 25% damage bonus if it is a taken combatant, and then an additional 5% extra damage by using the Torch artifact mod, which totals 1,771% damage bonus increase with this build. Gameplay loop. Now, let me give you a breakdown of the gameplay loop. We're going to be using a double primary setup, but that's okay because Malfeasance doesn't really work like a primary ammo weapon in this setup. It's almost like an infinite ammo, heavy ammo boss destroying weapon. I don't know what other way to explain it. Basically, it's ridiculous. So what you do with this build is you're using a solar weapon in your energy slot that's primary ammo, and you're going to be using it to get yourself Radiant by capitalizing on the artifact mod, Flint Striker. So upon scoring multiple precision hits within 3 seconds of each other, or upon scoring 3 kills within 1 second of each other with a solar weapon, you're going to be granted Radiant for 10 seconds. Now, the precision hits to trigger for Radiant is usually around 25% of the magazine, plus 1, rounded down. So there's some information that you can see in the graphic on the screen that's going to give you a better breakdown, but just know if it's got a bigger magazine, you're going to have to land a little bit more of your shots to be able to get that buff. But once you do have that buff, that is where Kindling Trigger kicks in. While you're Radiant, solar weapons are going to apply Scorch, and that Scorch is going to help you secure rapid kills, those 3 kills within 1 second of each other, which can happen with a perk like Incandescent on the machine gun. So once we have all of that going, what's next? Well, next we're going to need to take advantage of Torch. Torch is going to, when we are Radiant, grant us an additional 5% weapon damage against combatants that are affected by Strand or Stasis debuffs, and that's going to be slowed or frozen with our kit. And that's going to be taking advantage of the Duskfield Grenade and the Shurikens. The shurikens were recently buffed, so they have a little bit better tracking, so that's going to help them be a little bit more effective in hitting the targets that you are trying to hit to make sure that you're taking advantage of this artifact mod. So we've talked about how we're going to get Radiant in the build. We've talked a little bit about Malfeasance, and we've mentioned Lucky Pants. Now, what Lucky Pants provide is a little bit complicated, and I have another video that breaks it down quite dramatically, so I'm going to give you the short and narrow on Lucky Pants. The long and short of it is that you get a 60% increased damage against combatants per each shot for 5.5 seconds that stack. So it goes all the way up to a 600% damage increase on the 10th hit. So it goes 60, then 120, and then 180, etc., all the way up until you get to 600%. And because Malfeasance is a 180 round per minute hand cannon, you will be able to get to that 10th shot that deals the 600% increased damage pretty easily, as it has a fast rate of fire. Now, we also need to take into account that Vorpal weapon is also going to be on Malfeasance, so that's going to provide a 20% damage bonus when we're hitting champions or mini bosses or bosses. And if the champion happens to be taken, that's an extra 25% damage that we're also going to have on top of that Vorpal. That's going to stack with that Torch mod, that's going to stack with Radiant, and that's going to stack with Lucky Pants. So all of those combined together, so far, that's 25% from Radiant, up to 600% from Lucky Pants, 20% from Vorpal, 25% from them being taken, and another 5% from the Torch mod. Now, here is one more that we're going to take advantage of, and that one is our first fragment in the build. Whisper of Rending. Fragment number 1, Whisper of Rending. Primary ammo weapons deal 100% increased damage against stasis crystals and 50% increased damage against frozen enemies. Now, we can't freeze a boss, so this is going to be more effective when we're dealing with champions. So in those Nightfalls that I was mentioning, it's going to be very effective for providing an additional 50% damage against those frozen enemies. And when you consider all of the other damage bonuses that we had mentioned, now, you may not be able to get all of them at once, but keep in mind that this one of the 50% is very easy and very capable in your hands to accomplish. And all you've got to do is freeze the enemy with either both of your shurikens, or freeze the enemy by having your Duskfield grenade sit on them long enough to where your slow stacks eventually freeze the combatant. When they're frozen, boom, you're getting a 50% damage increase. Now add that on top of all of the other ones, whether you're getting Radiant, and then that means you're going to have Torch active as well. When we put everything together, the Radiant, the Lucky Pants, the Whisper of Rending, the Vorpal, the Taken Combatants, and the Torch mod, that's 1,771% of a damage bonus increase with our last shot there on Lucky Pants. That's a ridiculous amount. Now, obviously, a few shots before that, when we're at maybe, let's say, 480% of a damage bonus, that's still going to be a ridiculous amount and stay at 1,000%. And we're going to be at 800, 900, 700% on those last few shots. Let's say shot 6, 7, 8, and 9 on the way to that full 600% with Lucky Pants. That's a lot of damage. Okay, that's what I'm trying to explain here. And also keep in mind, I'm being generous because I also haven't included or factored in a solo operative, because this is based on the team setting. You wouldn't have solo operative, but let's say that you do have solo operative. Take that number that you have there and let's add an extra 15% weapon damage because we are solo and using solo operative. That number that it's going to be 2,037% with solo operative on that last shot of Lucky Pants with everything else put together. Now, as for the aspects in the build, I run Touch of Winter because this is going to be most effective for helping us secure getting our grenade back. With Touch of Winter, it enhances the Duskfield grenade. It's going to have that stasis crystal in the middle of it, which is something that you can break and shatter, and that's going to synergize with our second fragment, Whisper of Shards. When we shatter that stasis crystal, it's going to temporarily boost our grenade recharge rate, and then shattering additional crystals increases the duration of that benefit, and it caps at 10 seconds. Now, another way that we take advantage of that same fragment is through two other artifact perks. That's Pillar of Ice, where upon killing a frozen combatant, it's going to spawn an additional stasis crystal. Then with Hail the Storm, enemy shatters will deal 12.5% increased damage, and crystal shatters will deal 28.6% increased damage. So upon shattering a stasis crystal, it's also going to release 5 homing ice shards. They're going to spread uniformly, with one shard going towards the closest enemy and the other spreading. Now, each of those ice shards is going to deal 50 damage, but it's also going to apply slow stacks. So we're going to be able to loop a lot of this frozen effect on enemies, and that's going to make more chances for us to make more stasis crystals, and those are going to be something that we can shatter, not only just deal more damage, but get extra grenade regeneration in the build. And as for the second aspect, I'm going to run Grim Harvest. This is because when we defeat slowed or frozen combatants, which is the goal of this entire build by using Malfeasance and Lucky Pants, it's going to create stasis shards. These are going to grant us melee energy and allow us to loop into our armor mods. And those ones are Double Grenade Kickstart and Impact Induction. I know that Grenade Kickstart is not as fruitful as it used to be, but one copy of Impact Induction provides some additional grenade energy by taking advantage of our Withering Blade shurikens here within the build. Another way that we take advantage of those Withering Blade shurikens is through Whisper of Impetus, which also had a recent change to now provide 10 resilience, but damaging a target with a stasis melee will reload our stowed weapons and grant us a temporary boost to weapon ready speed, which is helpful for our machine gun if it doesn't have a lot of good handling. But really, this is also really beneficial for Malfeasance. After we dump our 20 shots with it, with Lucky Pants and everything, we want to just swap back to another weapon to keep dealing damage to get ourselves back to being radiant with the machine gun. So if we throw a shuriken, then it's going to reload Malfeasance for us and we don't have to worry about anything. Now, another way that we make sure that we're going to be able to keep our enemies slowed and frozen is through Whisper of Durance. We want to make sure that the slows that we do apply last longer, and that's going to be that Dusk-Filled Grenade. Now, the other special thing in this build is that with the combination of tier 10 resilience and one other fragment, we're going to be able to have a 58% damage reduction in our kit. That's going to help the survivability and endgame content for our Stasis Hunter here, which doesn't have as many survivability options after the nerfs to Whisper of Rime. So the way that we're going to do that is Whisper of Chains. Whisper of Chains states that it provides a 40% damage reduction when you are near frozen enemies or a stasis crystal. You have to be within 10 meters, and then it's a 40% damage resistance, so that's going to stack multiplicatively with your tier 10 resilience, and those are going to stack together, and then you're going to be provided with a 58% damage resistance in endgame content for an ability that comes up very frequently, whether it's through the Withering Blades freezing or the Dusk Fields freezing. So you're going to have a lot of survivability that's going to help you out in endgame content. Now, if you're running solo, you're going to definitely want to take advantage of Solo Operative. And if you are running in a team for Coils or Grandmaster, Nightfalls, anything endgame like that where you're in a team-based setting, you're going to want to take advantage of Rays of Precision. While Radiant, Solar Precision Final Blows will cause combatants to ignite. So that's going to help out in ad clearing because you can't take advantage of anything else in the last column of the artifact with the way that this build works. So let's get into the last couple armor mods that we have left in the build and we'll wrap this thing up. We're going to have Solar Siphon for our primary ammo weapon in our energy slot and in our heavy slot. And then we're going to have Kinetic Siphon for our Malfeasance. And then I run one copy of Powerful Friends because this is for when I'm in a team-based setting. And I don't think there's any other mods here that really benefit me in the helmet. Over on the chest, just go with the resistances of your choice. I'm running triple arc resist for the Nightfall. On the legs, what we're running is Recuperation to be able to get health each time we pick up an Orb of Power, and Innervation to be able to get grenade energy each time we pick up an Orb of Power. Then it's very important to run stacks on stacks. This just helps you get to the higher stacks of armor charges so we can take advantage of the grenade kickstart. And then on the Bond Cloak, mark is going to be Reaper, 1 copy of Bomber, and then Proximity Ward. And you don't have any idea how valuable this is until you need it, but it is incredibly valuable for surviving things that you shouldn't be surviving when you're performing that finisher. So Reaper, shortly after using a class ability, we're going to be able to spawn an orb of power right after we dodge. Once we do get that final blow with the weapon, with stacks on stacks, it's going to give us 2 armor charges. We're just going to get a little bit of grenade energy with Bomber and Proximity Ward. Think about this. The time it takes to do a finisher, to perform a complete finisher, is almost enough time to start your regen and get you almost half of your health regenerated with almost max recovery here with 90 recovery in the build. And by the time that overshield and that finisher are done, you should have almost all your health back. So this is actually really helpful in surviving when you need to go for finishers on enemies in tough situations. Make sure you capitalize on max discipline and max resilience. Try to hit somewhere around 70 recovery for this build and you should be fine. A little bit of decent amount of mobility so you can take advantage of Reaper and Bomber as often as possible. And a little bit of strength so you can take advantage of your shurikens. Now, you can run Gambler's Dodge, which is going to lower your cooldown rate, but I am preferring to use Marksman Dodge in this build just because I can dodge more often with that one. Your preference there, you can go with Gambler's Dodge. So that is everything. That is the build. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Give it a try. Don't underestimate it. Give it a try and tell me how you like it. Thank you guys all for watching. Have a wonderful day. Peace.